Welcome to Southern Cooking Made Simple. Easy to understand recipes, simple techniques, and very few ingredients. Just the thing that Grandma used to make when we used to go to her house on Sunday. Do you remember that? Remember how delicious the food was? Everything that our grandparents made was made from scratch, and that's the things that I'm bringing to you. I'm making some cornbread fritters and some Oriental beef stir fry, some corn on the cob, and a cucumber and onion salad. And the kicked up cornbread fritters are absolutely delicious. Everybody in your family will love this meal, and come on along for the ride. And when I was little, I'd say, Grandma, can I help you cook? And we'd be out to the camp or something. That's a picture of the camp now. That's Grandma holding me. Isn't it something to look back on those treasured years when we grew up, when family was all we had and all we needed? Today I'm making a delicious stir fry. I first browned the ground beef and I removed all the fat. I added back in about 4 tablespoons of the beef fat, a quarter of a white onion, just cut in quarter and then chopped it up a little bit, not much at all. And then that bag of, it was 1 pound almost, of little baby carrots. And I put that in my pan with that hamburger, and I put the lid on it and I let that cook for 5 minutes. It takes a long time for carrots that are that big to get done in the middle, and I like them to be in bite-sized pieces, so I leave them that big and just cut them once. And I added the quarter cup of water to help them steam so we could eat faster. Now my pan was exceedingly hot, and the grease was hot when I started. You got to remember that back in the day, they were cooking on a wood stove, so they didn't have any way to regulate their heat. Most usually they cooked on high, and I do too, especially when I'm making an Oriental stir fry. This is a very delicious dish the whole family will love. Now, after I cooked it the 5 minutes with the lid on and the quarter cup of water, and then flipped it over, stirred it good, and then let it cook another 5 minutes, then I done it exactly the same 2 times, and then I put about 1/8 of a head of cabbage. It was a pretty good size head of cabbage. I'm gonna say a cup and a half to 2 cups of cabbage, and I uh, spread that out on there in pretty big pieces, and then I put that in there and put the lid back on it, and I let that steam for 5 minutes because cabbage cooks in 5 minutes. Adding in the 1/4 cup of water, and that allows it to steam. And the steam creates a hotter heat than just cooking. And the steam creates like an oven in there and it presses that through. And then at the end of that 5 minutes, after you've let it sit there and cook, then you add in the garlic chili paste. And I put in about 3 or 4 tablespoons of that. Stir that through and let that cook for an additional 2 minutes, stirring, and then allow that to kind of caramelize on there, that garlic and chili paste. And then I added in about a quarter cup or more of soy sauce. And the soy sauce creates its own steam up through there. And don't touch it while it's sizzling with that soy sauce steam. Allow that to all cook off down there before you touch that again. And just remember, when they start to stick on the bottom, that means they're caramelizing and they're done. And then turn that off and set that off of a burner where it's cool so then you can go on to the next dish. This is Southern Cooking Made Simple, y'all. Mountain victuals, easy to understand recipes with very few ingredients. 1930s and 40s era recipes from the Depression. And just imagine back in those days, they didn't have a lot of food to cook with, so they had to come up with the very best tasting meals that they could at the time. And I was interested in cooking at a very young age, and my grandma used to let me help, and I absolutely loved it. Now today, I fried some fried green tomatoes, and when you slice your fried green tomatoes, you don't add anything to them or dip them in anything. They come out with their own natural juices out of the tomato, and that's what you dip into the cornmeal mixture. And then once you dip that into the cornmeal mixture, then you put that into a hot pan with hot grease, and I've got mine on high. My grandma just about always cooked on high because they couldn't control the heat. It was a wood burning fired stove, and you had to cook with intense heat. So, uh, now when you're frying your green tomatoes, you want to let them sit there on one side until they get completely brown on the bottom. See that? If you don't, some of the cornmeal stuff might fall off of them later. You want them to sit right there in that. Now, this is the batter for the cornbread fritters. And I kind of kicked it up a notch today with a little bit of onion powder and garlic powder, a little bit of chives and parsley, 1 egg, some self-rising cornmeal mix, and buttermilk. I did use a little bit of water, and what I'm doing is I mix that in there. I give you the exact directions in the recipe, the amounts, and I mix this in there, and I get that all congealed from the center out. See that? I'm stirring from the center of that bowl, just picking up a little bit of that cornmeal mixture on the outside of the bowl as I go. And then when you get almost done, blend it all through, and you're going to let this bloom. You want to set this aside, and you're going to let this bloom for 5 minutes. Now, after this blooms for 5 minutes, it's a real watery texture at first. And I'm only using the cornmeal mix that I had left over from the 1 cup where I was frying. I rolled my green tomatoes in it. I had 3 medium-sized green tomatoes, so I've got about a half a cup or a little bit more of cornmeal mix. And then the cornmeal, the buttermilk, a little bit of water, 1 egg, and more cornmeal, and I'm allowing that to bloom again. You allow it to bloom the second time, and after it blooms the second time, you're going to form it up into a ball. See, now I'm not stirring that, I'm folding that. If you notice, I work with the cornmeal very little. There's flour in that cornmeal, and there's gluten in the flour. And the more you work with your cornmeal and your flour, you've got baking powder in there, an egg, and all you're wanting to do is just touch that cornmeal and create a wetness. Once you create your wetness and all that cornmeal is into that ball, you're done. Don't touch it anymore. Form it into a ball and let it sit right there. And then it's going to sit and bloom again for 5 minutes while we get our pan hot and while we're finishing off our fried green tomatoes. Now, the fried green, this is my second batch. Spoon the cornbread fritters in about 1/4 cup size and spoon that over into the hot grease, and you want that grease to come about halfway up on the fritter. I've got high heat, hot grease, and when you put it in there, smash it out just a little bit to make it about the even consistency. And then you're going to let it sit right there, and what it'll do is it'll stick a little bit. And then how you'll know it's ready to turn, it'll be golden brown around the bottom. You can smell it, and always pay attention to the smell when you're cooking, because that's a big indicator for me. That tells me lots of times when to turn or when to check something. So you're really going to like this dinner. It's awesome put together just like I done it. Everything just turned out to be fantastic together. I'd been craving Long John Silver's fish and hush puppies. And to me, these kind of remind me of a hush puppy texture, a consistency. But mine are better. They're velvety in the middle. And all you'd have to do is just put a little bit of onion in there to make that be even more hush puppy like. I went subtle this evening. I was trying to be use as few ingredients as possible. I see there where I started to move those. You can move them. That shows you that they're getting ready to turn. Just go by the collar, and like I said, pay attention to the smell. That'll tell you every time. And try to flip it away from you so you won't splat hot grease on yourself. Do what I say, not what I do. These are absolutely delicious. Reminds me of my mom's cooking. When they get golden brown and crunchy like a piece of fish is on the outside, they're done. The fried green tomatoes turned out really good. The corn on the cob was excellent. And that vinegar in that cucumbers and onion over inside of everything that I cooked, when it went over in my plate, it was delicious. This has been Southern Cooking Made Simple, y'all. Fantastic meals brought back from the 1930s, from my ancestors to your table. Y'all come back now. Here